Hello and welcome back. We have another Old Pulteney on the market. This is Old Pulteney Harbour, and if you are a UK viewer and you frequent the supermarkets here, you might have seen it as well. This is a non-age statement release from Old Pulteney, and I got this one on offer for about £20. And really, what else can you get for £20? There's a couple of semi-acceptable options at that price point, but really not a lot. We're talking about the same kind of price point as Glenmorangie Elgin Classic, and honestly below a lot of the household name blends. This is not the first time that Old Pulteney have released a no-age statement whisky. There's been, I think, Huddart and Navigator and a few others. And obviously no-age statement whiskies are the devil to whisky enthusiasts. The idea that these distilleries are taking away our age statements and selling us whisky which is younger and often worse, and often for the same price and sometimes a higher price. It's really gained no-age statement whisky a bit of a bad name, but I think if it's done respectably and sensibly and it's offered at a cheap price, I can sometimes see the point of these no-age statement releases, and I can understand why the distilleries want to do it as well. If they can come up with something like this and make it work, it takes pressure off the stills, takes pressure off space allocation in the warehouses, theoretically takes some pressure off cask availability, and if it means that they're struggling to keep up with demand, then in theory it possibly means that they're able to still offer something, especially at the high volume entry level end. So providing they keep it at a very reasonable price, which Old Pulteney have, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. So Old Pulteney Harbour, it is 40% ABV. It doesn't have an age statement, as I said. It is definitely chill filtered, in my opinion, very, very clear. And I think it's probably had a fair dose of artificial colouring as well. So this is not a craft presented whisky at all, but it was £20 on offer. So let's get some in the glass. And I think the questions are going to be, is it any good? Is it worth the money? And what's it like compared to Old Pulteney 12? So Old Pulteney Harbour, on the nose. A distinct oakiness on the nose of this one, and I would go as far as saying that I think there's evidence that there's some refill oak gone into this one. It's a damp refill oakiness, not enormously fresh casks. Very sweet on the nose, sweet but also with a dark side. Sweet American oak, sweet maltiness, floral oak spice element on the nose, which actually reminds me quite a bit of the floral spiciness that you got on Old Pulteney 21, which you can't get anymore. Floral oak spice and cut flowers. Palmer violet, a little bit. Toasted oak, a little bit of barrel char perhaps. And the toasted oak, and more specifically the slightly dry oakiness that you get on this one, actually reminds me a bit of the Isle of Raasay RO2, I think it was, which I reviewed fairly recently. One of the inaugural batches from Isle of Raasay, and a nice salty oranges, maritime, fruity, malty, orangey note on the nose. Let's see how it tastes. On the palate, more oakiness, dark oakiness, toasted oak, barrel char, salty oak, quite malty as well, and floral maltiness, more of that cut flowers note that I was getting on the nose. Slightly nutty, overall reasonably light, but very pleasant. So again, quite oak, I'm not going to say oak dominated, but very oak forward. I think there's definitely been some thoughtful cask engineering gone into this one. They've obviously replaced the predominantly first fill bourbon casks that you get on the cask recipe for the Old Pulteney 12 And I think there's signs that they've gone for something a little bit more economical, but they've put some thought into it so that it doesn't just end up a lackluster experience. They've obviously gone for a cask recipe that gives different flavours, a different flavour profile, rather than just having a whiskey which is unfinished. Gonna have one more sip and look at the finish. Salted caramel, oaky, again, salty oak, floral oak spice, curiously slightly chocolatey on the finish, quite a long finish actually, much longer than you'd expect from anything bottled at 40%, and overall quite dry. So my judgment on this one, I think that it's evidently a young whiskey, but not immature. And I think the main difference between this and the Old Pulteney 12 is that there is a more direct cask influence in this whiskey compared to the 12-year-old. Some might actually say that that makes this a little more interesting than the 12, especially the 12 in its current form, and I'd actually be inclined to agree with them. I don't think this is a million miles away from the Old Pulteney 12. It definitely has that same distillery character, but I think that the casks that go into this one, they make it a little bit more rugged and robust, and not quite as polished, but a little bit more characterful. Actually, in a similar way to, I think I kind of have a similar judgment with the Bunnahabhain Storadar, in that I think that Bunnahabhain 12 is a very, very well made and well integrated and rounded and complete whiskey, whereas the Storadar, it has the signs of youth on it, but it has a little bit more cask influence, it's a little bit more spicy and a little bit more raw. And I think that which one you prefer out of the Bunna 12 and the Storadar really depends on your mood and what you're looking for, and I think it's a similar case with this. As for the casks that they use for this, Old Pulteney Harbour, they don't really give us a lot of information. They do say that it's American oak matured in blah blah blah, American oak ex-bourbon casks, sea air, blah blah blah. You know how it goes. But me personally, I kind of get the feeling that it's not entirely ex-bourbon. I definitely taste some floral, spicy rye influence on this one, as well as perhaps some other non-bourbon American whiskey casks. Or perhaps they're just using some very fresh, very high rye bourbon casks. One thing that does keep coming back to mind with this one though is the oakiness that you get from the Isle of Raasay releases, as well as some other whiskies which are matured in Chinkapin oak. I think that the slightly dry, toasted, spicy oakiness that you get in this, it does keep reminding me of those Chinkapin whiskies. Of course, I have no idea if that's what they've used, and bearing in mind that this is a very economically priced whiskey, possibly not, but it keeps bringing that to mind. So, who will like this? Who is this whiskey for? I think that people who like the early batches from Isle of Raasay will probably enjoy this, especially if you keep your expectations a little bit low. Maybe if you're looking for a more affordable, casual dram along the lines of Raasay. Also, people who normally like Old Pulteney 12, I think that they are a similar style. But if you're an Old Pulteney fan that's looking for something affordable and a little bit different to your usual dram, I think this is going to be a good one. For those out there who are still buying Old Pulteney 12, and I know a lot of people have probably moved on by now, I think that this is a very similar level of quality to the Old Pulteney 12, just with a slightly different cask recipe. I must admit that I don't often get excited about NAS whiskies, especially when it's an NAS whiskey that is an alternative to an age statement whiskey that we're all used to. I really, really didn't like Dalwhinnie Winter's Gold. Glenlivet Founder's Reserve, in my opinion, is absolutely shocking. Talisker Sky and all of those other Talisker no age statements, in my opinion, are worth avoiding. But there are a few NAS whiskies out there where they can be okay. Talking about things like Lachig Sinclair series, the Rioja one from Lachig, very, very good whiskey. And as I mentioned earlier, Bunnahabhain Storadar, which I think when you consider the lower price is really worth a look. And obviously things like Glenfarclas 105, when you consider that you're dropping the age statement when you buy a Glenfarclas 105, but you're getting such a better presentation, there are sometimes reasons to consider no age statement whiskies, although it must be said that a lot of the time when you look at some of these NAS whiskies, they're really reducing the price a little and the quality a lot. This one here though, this Old Pulteney Harbour, for £20 or even £25, I think this one is a solid casual dram. I think it's worth every penny, and probably more importantly, it's different enough to Old Pulteney 12 to be worth a try on those grounds alone. So let me know what you think about this one if you've had it, and let me know what you think about no age statement whiskey in general. Which are your favourite no age statement whiskies, and which ones are you really not a fan of? So thanks for watching, let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.